share or screen share or anything.
Yep. Okay. I will do that right now, and we should be live any moment. So we can start talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum. So let's get to it. Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. So we're going to be discussing something super fun that comes up a lot, which is, are Bitcoin and Ethereum growing from the same roots, or are they rivals? Are they fighting against each other for the future of crypto? So we're going to get into that in a minute. But first, let's do some intros and announcements. I'm Jessica Levesque. I am the executive director at C4, and we have our incredible certified Ethereum professional committee with us today. So let's start with intros, and then we'll get into our announcement. Josh, do you want to start by introducing yourself and go in a circle?
Sounds good. Josh McDougall. I'm one of the founders of C4 and currently working with Slow Ninja to make decentralized video games. I don't know what your circle looks like, but I'm going to say, Dustin, you're next.
Hi, I'm Dustin. I'm based in Singapore. I run a community called E65, and it's an Ethereum community nonprofit that covers the technical aspects of Ethereum.
Very cool. Kent?
Hi guys, I'm Kent. I've been on the CEP for a few glorious years now. I'm also the co-founder of a crypto AI startup called CoinCap, and a enthusiastic member and part of the East Denver community as well.
Cool.
Yeah. Hey everyone, I'm
You're the last
Cheyenne.
one in our circle.
Okay. I'm Cheyenne. I've been at the CEP. I've been the committee chair for I think 4 years now. And we have like an announcement coming up for that. 6 years. Oh wow. And overall I'm working security stuff, break things on smart contracts and other stuff. We have some security tooling coming up soon, which I'll share on Twitter. And also I did my PhD on blockchain technical nuances and their unforeseen consequences. So that's some fun thing to talk about later. Yeah.
Well, can I just say we've got quite the knowledgeable and skilled committee with us today, which is why this announcement of a transition is, I think, important, valuable, and also says a lot about you guys as a group. So Cheyenne, like you said, you've been the committee chair for 6 years, which is crazy to think in 2019 when we actually all met. Aside from Dustin, who joined a little bit later, you've been steering the ship, and we're going to be making a change to the captain, but you're still going to be on board. That was a good analogy. So why don't you share what's going on?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, like, we started as the committee. There was no real difference between like the chair and other members. I was really good at copy pasting. That's how I ended up being the committee chair. And we basically pushed for the CEP, the first version, the next one, and also the upcoming changes. Going through all the questions, it was a challenging time because like a lot of times like prod power or some other things in Ethereum, we needed to like make sure the questions are time tested and works. It's been fascinating working with this group, and I'll be continuing working with this group, but I just want to pass the golden key or the torch to Kent. And Kent has been like the technical knowledge and the community he has around Ethereum from like back in Shapeshift on to now. Like there's like so much that Kent has to offer, and I'm so glad that he's taking this role. And I'll be working with him under his leadership to see where we go from here.
Thank you, Cheyenne, for the key. I just want to say thank you for all your leadership on the committee. It's been awesome, especially tapping into like your technical knowledge and just always just your natural enthusiasm for what we're doing and for the mission of decentralization. It's also an honor to be joining all of you in the audience, but also the crew here. I really couldn't believe more in the mission of what we're doing. So the whole idea is this is all predicated on the notion that decentralized technology and distributed computing is going to change the world by changing the fundamental ways that economics and finance and society and culture work. And it's actually happening before our eyes. It's not just a sort of speculation anymore. But in order to get this right for humanity, we have to give people the right knowledge, like the real deal knowledge, minus hype, minus all the noise, and just help people understand why this is different from, say, a database and what this means for humanity. And I know of no better way to do that than C4. So it's a pleasure and honor to be the chair at this point.
Thank you guys. And Cheyenne, we can't thank you enough for everything that you've done to guide us along this way. And yeah, we didn't even have an exam when we all started to meet. So it's pretty cool to think about the creation of not only the exam, but all of the study materials. And for those watching, you may not know, but we meet every week at this time as a committee to talk about Ethereum. We talk about like the news, what's going on, and then also what we want to make sure we all understand and how we can help share that unbiased information with other people in the community. But yeah, that's a lot of hours if we were to do the math on the time we all spend together virtually. But I think it's definitely paying off. And I'm so, so grateful that you guys all donate your time and that, Kent, you are stepping up and are able to kind of take over and guide us as we go to the next, I guess, stage of the CEP committee.
And never a dull moment in Ethereum, that's for sure.
Oh, God, no. Okay, so with that being said, let's get into today's discussion. So we already talked about how we're discussing if there's a sibling rivalry between Ethereum and Bitcoin, what that looks like. But mostly we just want to cut through some of the maxi takes and look at first principles about Bitcoin and Ethereum and really get into what this trustless or trust minimized technology is all about. So with that being said, Kent, as the new chair, do you want to get us started and get, I know you were in Bitcoin before Ethereum existed, so you want to do a little intro from your perspective?
Sure. So I just want to preface all this by saying I really passionately believe that this Bitcoin versus Ethereum thing is just ridiculous. And in fact, if you engage with actual real life humans and not online, you'll often find that we're actually on the same team. It's a minority of maxis on different sides that tend to perpetuate this. But at the end of the day, just to put this in some historical context, Bitcoin is the one that started all of this. This platform, this protocol that Satoshi built that allowed for trustless exchange of value. And from the onset, Bitcoin was designed for that. And as we've seen since 2009, it's really freaking good at that. Essentially 100% uptime with Bitcoin. It's look how much value the protocol protects, and its sort of effort to be an alternative to the inflating central bank central bank currencies has been super effective. It's that metaphor of digital gold is a good one. However, Bitcoin was not designed to be a lot more, or really anything more than just that, to be Bitcoin. It mints Bitcoin. It's a consensus mechanism to make sure the system keeps working, and this wonderful network of computers making that happen, and miners. And then you have you can send Bitcoin back and forth. That's it. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but really, it's hard to build much more on Bitcoin. It's difficult, even to this day. Ethereum was predicated on this notion that, okay, well, why don't we take that same tech and just add a lot more functionality and maintain the same basic premise of decentralization, meaning it's trustless. You don't need to trust your counterparty. No single party or group of parties can control it. It's censorship resistant. There's no gatekeepers. Everything that happens is transparent on this blockchain. So Ethereum, same premise, same ideas, but building in a much more diverse kind of way. So fast forward at this point, Ethereum also has Lindy. The Lindy effect. It's been around quite a while. And just like Bitcoin, essentially 100% uptime, it's protecting billions and billions in value, and it works. So kind of the purpose of this chat is to talk about the differences and similarities, but also I think it's important to call out some of the misconceptions that exist around Ethereum, because these are still bandied about. And I mean, frankly, they're false. So we should be mindful of that. Both of these platforms are changing the world. They're making it a freer place, a better place. This is happening now. So let's dig in.
Awesome. That was a great intro, Kent. I'm wondering if we want to start with a little bit of the history. I know we don't want to go too in depth about this, but Josh, you have, I think, guided us through this before because you were there for the inception of Bitcoin. Not that you're Satoshi, but you were there pretty much shortly after. And then same thing with Ethereum, you were part of that initial crowd sale. And for those who don't know, Vitalik was actually a board member of C4 when we first started in 2014, before Ethereum even existed publicly yet. So Josh, you want to give us some info on what this looked like?
He also helped with the certified Bitcoin professional examination questions way back in the day.
Yeah, when you take the exam, you could be taking a question that was originally written by Vitalik, who clearly thinks Bitcoin has value. Okay, go ahead.
Definitely. I mean, as far as like Bitcoin's inception, first of all, there's always someone more OG than you. So there's lots of people who are into Bitcoin far before me, and Ethereum. You know, there's a very quick community around what Vitalik was building and conceptualizing. As far as Bitcoin goes, the original white paper, the Bitcoin white paper, lists a number of different references about the inspirations that eventually led to Bitcoin. There were many attempts at digital golds, at electronic money, and most of them required some sort of centralization. So there was lots of attempts at this technology over time, and they are, you know, close grandparents to what became Bitcoin. But Bitcoin ultimately kind of cracked the code on what that missing piece was for decentralization, to create a money that couldn't be stopped and couldn't be nefariously altered without some sort of middleman to kind of direct it all. So that was the big innovation with Bitcoin, is, hey, how do we create not only a way of transferring funds, but actually how do we define the economics of that as well, rewarding those who help participate in the system, and kind of preventing those who are participating in the system from doing things that are nefarious to it and to each other. So a lot of incredible innovation in that one simple little white paper of you know, Bitcoin.pdf of what could be done. Now, with the creation of such a fascinating project that inspires so many, which Bitcoin was, you know, a lot of people look at a project like that and go, what else? I bet I can make this do stupid shit. And the reality is, you know, Vitalik is one of these people who is like just so fascinated in Bitcoin that he's thinking, you know, how can we extend this idea, this decentralized idea, to be just a little bit more, So he was researching technology like Mastercoin, and colored coins, which was a way of saying, okay, yes, we can transfer Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network, but what if I wanted to create a different token? What if I wanted to create a stable coin that used the Bitcoin network to transfer back and forth? What mechanisms within the Bitcoin project exist that I can kind of twist in a way that allows me to accomplish this thing that Bitcoin wasn't necessarily specifically designed for, but accidentally has the capabilities for? Or what changes could we make to Bitcoin that would allow for this to happen better? So there was significant research going into that, and it was very difficult, for some reasons that I'm not going to necessarily get into, although we will kind of talk about some of them down the road. But then there was also political reasons why this was difficult. So, well, trying to get this, well, can we kind of make fake assets and transfer those around? Then the idea came to Vitalik of, well, why don't we, you know, try and get smart contracts working on top of Bitcoin? And the smart contract concept also has some prior art. in other communities and technologies. But the idea was, Bitcoin's good at transferring assets. What if it would be good at doing kind of more general purpose computations and scripting as well? How can we kind of manipulate Bitcoin to do this? Long story short, there were ways of manipulating Bitcoin to do this, but we get back to that political aspects. The concern was, well, we can make Bitcoin do it and then make this smart contract idea work on top of Bitcoin. But if the Bitcoin community decides they don't want this, they can kind of easily turn it off with other tweaks in the other direction. So that's when the idea was kind of abandoned. Well, we're not going to do it there. We're going to build this smart contract idea on a different blockchain that's similar to Bitcoin. And then from there, it kind of snowballed in, well, you know what? Why don't we just own this entire stack? We'll make our own chain as well for some reasons, and kind of move forward with that. And that was kind of a very 1,000-foot in the air synopsis of how it went from how do we tweak Bitcoin to do more to, you know what, it's going to make more sense if we just own this entire kind of project from the ground up. We're going to build our own network called Ethereum and move forward with that.
I want to add something in here, like it's a bit of a tangent, but related to how a lot of Bitcoiners see Ethereum as or call Ethereum as altcoin or shitcoin. Like there was a period like Bitcoin, like we had open source software for a while, and forking open source software to modify it was a thing. But then Bitcoin came out and had this whole network around it. So a lot of people start forking Bitcoin code, creating their own network. We had beer coin that try to have one beer coin would be always a beer anywhere in the world. Or we had some others that were just slight changes, just naming or changes to the network, to the code. And a lot of them just someone and their friends would run the node. So it was considered altcoin or shitcoin in that sense. But then we had some interesting use cases that Namecoin that try to do DNS on using a blockchain or Bitcoin fork, which was I was excited about it, but it was too early. It was too complicated to do DNS. It was not the time and the right way of doing it. So there's so many of these around. And as Josh was saying, that a lot of people Mastercoin and so on try to do more with Bitcoin. We had Omnichain or colored coins that try to use this OP return part of Bitcoin to do more of Bitcoin, which I think back then they didn't necessarily have that name for it. A lot of people now know about data availability layer that talking about that. So that was a problem. If you had use OP return, you had to have a whole data stored somewhere, and where it can't be really decentralized. So there was a period that there was mostly there was Bitcoin and shitcoins, also Litecoin on the side. But there was these things in there. That's why a lot of times, even myself, when Ethereum came out, we were overwhelmed with amounts of random coins that are coming out, and I was this is another shitcoin. Till later in the year that I started looking into Solidity, smart contract ideas, and some others that I was wow, there is so much more you can do with this. I still had no clue what to do with it. I was there's so much more you can do. So there's this period that explains a lot how a lot of early Bitcoiners looked at Ethereum and still do sometimes. But I just want to give this context before moving to the rest of it.
I think that was great, both of you sharing that. And Dustin, I also appreciate that you had on the screen scrolling for a bit to show a lot of things came before Bitcoin. So it's not as if Bitcoin just suddenly materialized out of nothing and then Ethereum copied Bitcoin. Bitcoin copied a lot of and used a lot of previous technology. And so it wasn't just this magic that poof appeared. And I think that context is really important to see how we've come along. I think the altcoin discussion is really interesting because our CBP committee still uses the term altcoin, doesn't find it pejorative, thinks that it should explain Ethereum and other coins as well, but that there's a distinction between an altcoin and a shitcoin, in that we could call Ethereum or Ether an altcoin, but it's not the same as a shitcoin, which I think is a good point to why we have committees and how our committees have to come to consensus for that topic, but our committees don't have to come to consensus with each other about the different technology. And obviously at C4, we believe in both technologies, or we wouldn't have committees dedicated to learning and educating others and testing on this knowledge. But so that kind of gives you like a little insight into behind the scenes at C4 with differing opinions. And even though everyone actually believes in all of the technologies, the terminology used for it is slightly different and disagreed upon, I guess. Did anyone have anything you wanted to say about that, or should we jump into some of the more specifics about the two techs? Ready? Okay, let's get into the roadmap, which, by the way, you guys, on our end, we've got a chat, and Josh jokingly said, can we get a dull day added to the Ethereum roadmap? Because there's always something, which just shows, I mean, we meet every week, and every week there's something new that someone's bringing that's happening in the community that someone hasn't heard of, or, you know, just going back and forth. So it's pretty cool. So let's get into some more of the kind of nitty-gritty details about this. Dustin, do you want to jump in? I don't think we've heard from you.
What topic are we moving on to?
Whichever one you'd like, but I think we should start to talk about more specifically what the similarities and differences are about the two techs, unless I've gone off the rails. Is that where we're at? Did I
That's where we're at.
Okay.
Maybe let's start with some similarities.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah, let's start with some similarities between the two blockchains. Dustin, do you want to, or somebody else wants to go?
Yeah, I can go. I think broadly speaking, we can say that the similarities are they're both open blockchains. And by open, I think what we mean is that you don't require permission from anyone. You don't need to make an application to run the blockchain or to participate in it or to use it. That means that as a validator or as a block producer, you don't need anyone's permission. As long as you can connect to the network and the peers can find you, you're able to contribute to the network. As a user, you don't need any kind of validation. You don't need any kind of certification to be able to participate in the chain. The other point I would make is that you can also see that that bleeds into other aspects of it as well. They tend to favor open source projects as well. So you have open source wallets. You tend to have more open source components such as node software and stuff like that. There are still things that are closed source. For example, you know, some block explorers are closed source. But I think generally speaking, the open nature of the chain means that it is more amenable to being seen by entire communities where everyone can inspect the code of this wallet and go, this is, you know, this code is legit and it's safe to run. The other parts that are similar is that they use similar cryptographic mechanisms as well in terms of using the linked list chains of blocks. They both also have, like, you know, probabilistic finality, a finality that isn't instant. Um, you could say that they're both still trying to scale, partially because they're used so much. I think, you know, one thing that's often ignored when there are new chains that come out, they say, oh, we're perfect. We have, you know, we have how many transactions per second. It's easy to make those claims when there aren't as many users on the chain. So I think one point to note is that often a chain's performance is theoretically good until the rubber hits the road and you have tons of users that are suddenly, you know, buying CryptoKitties, or there are lots of people that are using the chain and it impacts performance in a way that is difficult for you to anticipate. So I would say that both of these networks have had their growing pains, but they've also managed to scale beyond the critical mass and these like performance hits that they've taken, and they've learned those lessons and continued to scale the chains. Yeah.
Josh, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, the scaling thing. I always remember there's a saying of no one drives in New York, the traffic's too bad. And we see that a lot in especially on both Bitcoin and Ethereum. Like, oh, no one's using the network. The transaction fees are way too high. And well, it's the other way around. Too many people are using the network, and that's why the transaction fees are high. It's been interesting to watch, although they both share scaling issues for the same reason that they're trying to bring something to the world. Um, Both projects, though, have slightly differing priorities, and that kind of dictates the routes they tend to take when it comes to scaling. But ultimately, we see kind of very similar concepts being used on both sides, but sometimes with differing results or with kind of differing belief in that kind of scaling. With Ethereum, actually on both you see L2s, like, oh, let's add different layers and then they can kind of come down and sync up to the master. In Bitcoin, we haven't really seen a huge amount of that have taken off. There's the Lightning Network, a couple other options as well, but ultimately, main chain Bitcoin tends to still be king as far as sending transactions. In Ethereum, we've seen extensive amount of success in different Ethereum's or different networks built on the Ethereum technology that can kind of talk amongst themselves. But ultimately, still scaling that Ethereum chain is a priority as well. So it's interesting to watch them do things differently and similarly and see which ones the community kind of takes a hold of.
This might be a good jumping off point into a discussion about consensus mechanisms and proof of stake versus proof of work. Unless, Jess, you wanted to take things in a different direction?
No, I think that's perfect. Kent, jump on in.
Cool. Okay, so super important difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, and also one it's very illustrative of kind of how the two communities generally approach things. So in Bitcoin, since time immemorial, since Satoshi, the consensus mechanism, which is really the way by which these computers are incentivized to make sure that the network functions as intended in a trustless fashion, and there's no double spending, and there's nothing, crazy going on, and people don't lose their money. That's basically called proof of work. And I don't want to get too technical with this discussion. We could turn that into a whole other episode. But the important thing to understand is that in Bitcoin, the consensus mechanism is essentially a lot of very high-powered computers solving, like basically in a race to solve really complex math problems. And if you win that problem, in other words, if you spend enough electricity on your computing resources, you win a block reward, you win some Bitcoin. And it's proven to be very effective. It does have arguably its downsides particularly with using a lot of energy. Although some would say that Bitcoin, and it's a fact actually, Bitcoin has gotten more green over time, which is awesome to see. But let's talk about Ethereum because this is a very important difference. When Ethereum was launched, and for the first many years of its existence, it was also proof of work. And the reason for that is proof of work was really the sort of state of the art and the only really proven out sort of thing. So by the time Ethereum launched, and it was even conceptualized in 2013-ish, Bitcoin had a track record of protecting value and success. But when Ethereum was actually conceptualized, and really from the beginning, the intent was to be a proof of stake network, where instead of you're betting resources, you're actually staking tokens you own in order to say, yes, I'm going to help support the network. If I do something wrong or I'm not participating in this, then yes, the network can steal tokens away. So it's a whole different concept. Back in 2014, when Ethereum really was sort of launched as a project, in 2015 when it went live, there wasn't too much proof of stake wise out there. There was something called NXT that really was not very effective at proof of stake, and basically to solve that requires a lot of really intense game theory. But the idea with Ethereum was always like, okay, we know we can work to get there. Eventually, we want to swap in proof of stake over proof of work. I can't recall Vitalik's exact ideas there, but I know that the green aspect was a good one, or that was that's a primary motivator. Is like, let's be this world computer that isn't using so much energy. Proof of stake is quite it's like maybe 1% or a tenth of a percent the amount of energy that Bitcoin requires. It's a big difference. So a few years ago, this thing called the merge happened, and now Ethereum uses proof of stake, and that's proven thus far to be equally effective and secure at providing a consensus mechanism. The reason I said this is very illustrative of the difference between the two protocols is it's hard to imagine the Bitcoin community ever wanting or agreeing to do such a deep overhaul to the protocol. In Bitcoin, and maybe this is owing to its sort of digital gold kind of thesis. Historically, it's always been much more conservative. The community and the protocol doesn't really change very quickly. When it does, it's gradual, and typically it's not like these big changes. The merge, the switch to proof of stake on Ethereum was likened, and I think this is a great analogy, but it was likened to like imagine you're flying a plane in the middle of the flight, you change the engine. And that's really kind of how it was because Ethereum was live at the time. But the way it was executed was really interesting and quite effective. So um, the consensus mechanism is an important difference, but also the way the two communities approach things. Ethereum is more of like, move fast and break things, hopefully in testnet, really, move quickly. Whereas Bitcoin is just this slower moving thing. And that actually works great for both networks. Bitcoin is not trying to be a ton more. There are scaling challenges, and I think a lot of Bitcoiners would like for the network to do more, but it's not it's not grasping at as much as ETH is. So Ethereum really has to be more daring, and I think both approaches are great. I'm very glad that these two decentralized systems have their own value systems.
I think I think it's I think it's important to be clear that um, Bitcoin is not proof of work with its mining and everything because they haven't thought of a way to migrate from it. Like proof of work is a fundamental feature of Bitcoin, a fundamental part of Bitcoin. Ultimately, like what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is the Bitcoin asset and its ability to be transacted around in a decentralized way, but also its ability to keep that asset specifically safe. Like the main product of Bitcoin is the Bitcoin asset. So the Bitcoin network is there for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is created through the conversion of energy into the value of this asset that is Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin community would, theoretically never be interested in moving to a proof of stake model because that's not what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin isn't the administration of this network to move this Bitcoin asset around. Bitcoin is the conversion of energy into this Bitcoin asset and the management of this asset. So where Ethereum's focused, obviously the Ether asset is important, but Ethereum's focus is to create a decentralized smart contract system and everything that goes along with that. Their focus isn't let's make Bitcoin the general term for it is sound money. Let's make the sound money thing that fundamentally takes something physical energy and converts it into this digital asset. It's, hey, let's make sure everyone has this world computer that we can do finance on over here in Ethereum. So again, I just wanted to clarify that the reason for their mechanisms being different isn't just like hey, like we haven't evolved yet as Bitcoin. Bitcoin is very much intentionally proof of work. And Ethereum always wanted to eventually get to proof of stake.
There's also something related to this is like proof of stake and Ethereum is like way more complicated than Bitcoin, like the way it works, the source code and everything around that. And there is some with the security lens, there's something about that simplicity and it only does one thing and it does it well and secure compared to like Ethereum. And we've seen, like, especially early years, a lot of people couldn't trust Ethereum because they couldn't understand how it works. But it was much easier to understand Bitcoin, even though it's still hard for like someone that hasn't heard anything about these to understand how mining works and everything else. Um, but still, like, you don't really need to understand how Bitcoin mining works to use Bitcoin, similar to you don't know how your credit card works when you're using it. Like, there's that mindset too. But there's this complication with Ethereum that it's fair, because it's also, when it came out, there was a roadmap of these are the changes we're going to make over the next 10 years, 20 years, like that. But Bitcoin got to a state that people believed in it, accepted it, and kind of stayed there. I know there's a lot of changes like Taproot and some of the changes that were made, but the pace of change is like really slow. It's political, as just said. There was like a whole block size debate back then. Now we have this whole like how much data you can put in there. Can you put JPEGs or not? There's like all these that like takes so much time to change. But like on the other side, Ethereum has this roadmap that like we do one hard fork every year, like, or more. That is talking like that about Bitcoin is kind of taboo. Like, you don't do hard forks unless like shit hits the fan. But that was going to also the another difference between these two. And I think, yeah, we covered the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, basically, they were and are designed differently. They have different purposes, which enables different capabilities. And that is seen in many different ways, including how updates are made and how frequently forks happen and all of that. Do we want to get into some of the, I guess, more technical pieces, like some real data about this? Now we've talked about the consensus mechanisms. Hello, welcome back, Dustin. Zoom does not, I guess, subscribe to the Lindy law as Bitcoin does, and Ethereum is beginning to, in that it does break down. So hi again. So where do we want to go next? More specific details about like transaction times and finality, or does anyone have anything that we've covered you want to add more to? No? All right.
I just rambled for a bunch, so I thought I'd get everyone else.
I don't think you rambled. I think what you had to say was super important. I always love,
Did
Josh,
we
when you give
cover?
context about what happened in the early days and what that looked like from an insider's perspective. Dustin?
I guess another. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dustin.
Oh, I thought someone else was saying something. I don't know.
Maybe
Did we cover MEV?
We have not.
You broke up.
No,
I didn't.
Oh no, I was wondering if we covered MEV, because I think that's one of the things where, how do you say, the differences between single purpose and general purpose really comes to the fore, because Bitcoin's keeping it simple for just transactions or transfers of value means that you don't add this layer of programmability on top of it. And when you put programmability, you layer on smart contracts, you have decentralized exchanges, you have like liquidity provision. All of these things add layers of complexity on top of it. And then there are other strategies that are profit maximizing that can be unintended side effects. So Bitcoin doesn't have MEV kind of by design because they don't layer programmability into it. So side effect of it is that Ethereum has MEV because it has programmability and all of these other markets built on top of it. And Bitcoin doesn't now, but when there's BitVM and the other like Bitcoin L2s that they're trying to build on top of it, I think it's quite conceivable that MEV would exist in those iterations of Bitcoin. And it's quite interesting to see because it's a community that's not had to deal with MEV for the, 8 to 9 years that it's kind of been in force, and it would be like almost like a naive implementation from people that haven't experienced that kind of MEV to be, to have to deal with it now because it's become part of your network.
Yeah. So the miner extracted value means that just the order of transactions matters a huge amount in Ethereum, and it kind of doesn't in Bitcoin. Like, okay, I need to have my transaction added to the chain to confirm it, to make sure that it happened. Ultimately, if it happens this block, or if it happens next block, or if it happens at the beginning of the block or the end of the block, I don't super care. I need it in there. It doesn't really matter. I get the funds go to the destination that they need to. In Ethereum, because you're executing little programs, if the programs execute in this order or they execute in this order, that can be millions of dollars in differences. And both for each transaction themselves, but also for the transactions that they're kind of competing with as well. So this is the concept of, well, I as a miner, if you want your transaction to be in a better place, then maybe show me the money, give me a little tip in that transaction, and I'll see about doing something good for you. So there's a whole economy over what the blocks look like that is far beyond just the space allotted in the block, which is Bitcoin. Like, okay, we can only fit 100 transactions, better make sure yours has a good transaction. This is a far more in-depth economy of like, I really need this to happen, and I need it to happen right here, or I need nothing to happen. I need you to make sure it doesn't run at all. It's a whole fascinating tangent, Cheyenne.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of related to that. So like a way of looking at it, like a lot of times in Bitcoin world, there is like, you can see these charts of inflow and outflow to exchanges, like central exchanges. And with that, a lot of people can take the meaning that like people are sending to exchanges to sell, or people are leaving exchanges to like hold longer. And you can see the sell and buy pressure, or like forecast that. So it's about like that whole like knowing, kind of like having the information or knowledge of what is up yet to come. So on Ethereum, the transactions happen. There's like similar to Bitcoin. There's like mempool, like all the nodes get the transaction. And as Josh was saying, there could be different like exchange or like orders or some other transactions, which then with the knowledge, miners before the merge, anyone like basically validators or block builders, we don't get into details after the merge, it's now called like maximum extractable value, because like we don't have like miners anymore. It's almost a similar thing, but it's zoomed into the tech, as in you can run these block builders to check if people are buying this token from this exchange, like decentralized exchange, like a Uniswap. So if you see a lot of like inflow to that exchange, you can do a buy before this inflow and do a sell after this inflow, or do sandwich attack, as they say. So like you profit from that. And there is like that whole insider knowledge about what is yet to come and how you trade with that. And there is also like market makers can use this. Like there's like CowSwap on some others use kind of like this. It's not like MEV, but in the sense that like if I want to sell token A and buy token B, and someone else like sell B and C, and like the other way around, you can do this chain and like move less of the tokens around and like profit from the fees around it. So there's like different methodology, different hacks, and it's more similar to like high frequency trading in some sense, like in the sense that like what is the price coming and getting like a bit of the sense here and there and like make a lot of money around it. And yeah, I think that's good enough for MEV. We can go to MEV bundles like Boost and like some other things, but I think that's too depth into the MEV world that we don't really need to go.
Yeah, let's not do a deeper dive on it, but I think that was really interesting. And also, as I was thinking about MEV, I was like, oh gosh, I can't remember even the differences between what it stood for. Like the abbreviations, there's so many abbreviations, it took me a moment to like wrap my brain around it. So especially when they change, we just like to make things super confusing, I guess. Same acronym, different meaning for MEV. So we've got a little over 10 minutes left. Is there anything we want to talk about specifically before, I don't know, anything more technical before we get into our questions about Bitcoin versus Ethereum personally, what we see the benefits and challenges are?
One main thing I want to talk about, like basically, I mean, I can imagine, I can't believe it's like 10 minutes left. I have so much to talk about. But
13.
like
Well, we could do a part 2 like we always end up doing because we
yeah.
can't.
One main thing is like the way these two blockchains or accounts work. Like they all use like public key cryptography for like accounts and private keys. But for the coin going around or like that value going around, Bitcoin uses this model called UTXO, unspent transaction output, which is like every coin that you send around, imagining it as like actual coin, and then you want to send it to someone. Like I want to send half a Bitcoin to, like I have 1 Bitcoin and I want to send it to Josh. Basically, I send half a coin to Josh, half a coin to my address or like another address I own. So you can track these coins in a way that they can merge, they can like split, but you can track these around. Ethereum and a lot of other blockchains also use something called like balance base, as in if I get any money, my balance increases and there's no coin to track. Like the actual payment cannot be tracked in that sense. But it's different models, like better or worse. Like this balance has like some options that you can use. It doesn't matter where the money is coming from, they all get together, like merged together. Bitcoin use that UTXO model, which I think where scalability is a different thing. Like I can send the coin to Josh, and while it's unconfirmed, I may be able to do it, spend it again, but some miners, some nodes might not like broadcast it. But balance space, it's like all the same. Like it doesn't matter if there's no unconfirmed balance in that sense. I guess there is unconfirmed balance. There's no unconfirmed coins. There's like the technical nuances that I feel like they're deep down in the model how they work, but they change how you see the value change. I remember like even in one of the papers like a way long time ago, we were talking about the terminology it's used as like when we talk about sending coins, that already gives us someone this idea of that like you are actually sending someone, even though you're just changing the ownership of a coin, which is a different way of looking at it. But there's so much around how we talk about this versus how it works that which might not be the same.
I think it's also worth pointing out that like the UTXO model makes it a little more challenging to program smart contracts because the way you reason about balances is very different. And then there's like the idea of statefulness or statelessness that again makes it a bit challenging for let's say doing smart contracts on UTXOs. I recently met someone that works on Cardano, for example, which is a UTXO based model, but they also have smart contracts. And reasoning about balances within a UTXO based like blockchain becomes challenging when there are smart contracts that need to understand the state and the balances. And the UTXO model doesn't lend itself to that very easily without having to do a bunch of workarounds. So that's another aspect uh, that is worth considering as well. How the blockchain was designed also kind of affects your ability to do certain things on it.
Yeah, and
Yeah, really?
again, UTXO is actually like extreme. We go back to that like, oh well, Bitcoin did it in a kind of a more simple way. So it's like, okay, this is nice, it's concise, it's easy, it's very simple, and it works in Bitcoin. When you start bending it to do weirder things, it becomes really, really awkward, really, really fast. So yeah, fundamental differences that tend to mean a lot down the road.
And I feel like Dustin's example, Cardano was one of the examples that when they launched this smart contract model, the blockchain kind of halted because like there was one smart contract that people want to buy coin with, and because of the UTXO, there could be almost like one transaction per block. Don't remember vaguely, but there was like this really concurrency issue that like they faced with the UTXO model.
Someone put at the beginning of the stream in chat that it's like oil and water. I thought that was interesting. Like oil is needed for, let's say, your car, or olive oil, make a salad, whatever. There's so many different uses for it. Same thing with water, but they're totally different. And if you try to make one have the different purpose, I know it's not a perfect analogy, but like we need to accept that things have different purposes and different makeups, and that doesn't mean that one doesn't have value. Whoever put it in the chat didn't say which is which.
Yeah.
And they may have been talking about it as antagonistic, but I'm going to choose to take it in a positive way and say that they're just talking about the properties being different. I'm not sure that's what they meant, but
Yeah, one difference is like, so we needed Bitcoin to exist and evolve into a form that like then Ethereum could just build on top of it. Even the proof of work was like almost identical, just different algorithm, but almost identical. We needed that to be there, to evolve, to experiment, to like learn, and also like the Bitcoin itself to be able to buy Ethereum. Yeah.
So should we talk a little bit about the things that we wish Ethereum did that we wish Bitcoin could do? Do we wish that Bitcoin could do certain things that Ethereum can do and vice versa? Or are we happy to accept that they're different types of technology?
So this question is at the end of our agenda here, and I was just looking at it before the discussion here, and I was actually thinking about the flip side of the question of like because the other one was good too, but like what do I wish that Ethereum could do that Bitcoin does, and it's at first blush, it's hard to think of something because all the functionality of Bitcoin is there, and you can do a lot more on Ethereum. But there's one aspect of the Bitcoin community that I think is laudable, and that's the fact that there's kind of this real shared sense of like, hey, this platform, this protocol exists to provide a hedge against central banks inflating the ever-loving crap out of their currencies, which has been happening for a long time, and there's no end in sight. And this is seen as a very powerful hedge against that threat and a sort of plan B, an escape hatch for anybody that wants to kind of mitigate that threat. And a lot grows out of that, kind of this sense of I mean, it kind of goes back to Bitcoin's libertarian roots, but that sense of like self sufficiency, self sovereign, self custody. That's really important stuff. So it really kind of, and that can manifest itself in negative ways too, because you get groupthink and you kind of get, certain higher profile people in the space who are very unforgiving of other opinions. That's not good. And I don't think Ethereum generally does that. But I found myself like, for example, earlier this year, last year, wishing that Ethereum had more of a shared sense of identity. Um, Part of the reason it didn't is, Ethereum does a lot more. So you have a much broader range of people joining the mix, so from all sorts of different backgrounds and interests. It isn't, it's kind of a far cry from that very pure sort of independent, self-sovereign libertarian streak that really gave rise to Bitcoin. Although there are certainly those people in Ethereum as well, but it felt like the community itself, which is a very abstract notion, but people and teams and projects and organizations are all kind of moving in different directions. And maybe that's because it is, there is no leader telling you what to do, but there seemed to be sort of just a lack of like, shared direction. But that kind of corrected itself earlier this year, I think. Like part of it was like the Ethereum Foundation is an influential group in the space, although by no means can like instruct people what to do. But I think they've kind of helped kind of provide more direction. Specifically, for example, in terms of like, hey, maybe we should put more focus on scaling layer one of the blockchain. Layer two has been very important. And also there's been legitimate critiques about, okay, well, if these layer twos are successful, by what means will value accrue back to the layer one? That's very relevant for the security of the protocol because ETH needs to have value in order to be a secure platform. And the more ETH goes up, the harder it is essentially to break consensus. So, yeah, that was a kind of a concern I had, but I feel like maybe it's just in response to a lot of criticism and just, a long, more difficult period in the space. There seems to be kind of this kind of loose consensus. And I use the word loose because, again, it's just a community that exists that anybody can enter and join or leave, and nobody has the ability to call the shots.
I want to say something real quick, Kent, about what you said about Bitcoin and the purpose of it to be used to change how our financial system works and banking. And that really was the original purpose. And in a couple of weeks, our Bitcoin committee is going to have a live stream about scary stories, which we always hear about crypto and hacks and losing wallets, but we're flipping the script a bit and we're talking about scary stories in fiat and how the banking industry that has many people, falling all over themselves for how much they love the traditional fiat government-backed currency is actually has a lot of scary stories as well, and they may be different, but because it's something we've just experienced for our whole lives and for centuries, it's like, it's fine, even though it's broken. And so we're going to look at it from that angle. So anyways, if you're watching this now, join us. If you're watching this later, check it out in our YouTube, because I think it'll really add to that conversation. Anyways, segue. Let's get back to the final things we wanted to say related to what Kent was just talking about, this question about what we wish the other tech might be able to do or not do, and carry that convo on.
Yeah, I was actually thinking on like what Ethereum can do that Bitcoin, like what Ethereum needs to do that Bitcoin can. I realized you can basically write a smart contract to do that. Because like there was also even like Bitcoin mining as a smart contract. There were like coins and tokens that like required people to do almost identical Bitcoin mining to be able to get the tokens out, which is absurd to do, but like people did that like, because you can. On the other side, I feel like I wanted the Ethereum community overall to be more like Bitcoiners. There was always like not necessarily anti-government, anti-bank, but they were always considering that like we don't need to keep out control of this network. It's not necessarily true now. Everyone like celebrating ETFs and like big companies buying like massive amounts of Bitcoin. It's good for the price, but not necessarily good for the control and the network. So it's not necessarily true, but Ethereum was a lot more rainbows and unicorns for a while. Now I see that Ethereum Foundation, I love talk about privacy and like actually putting resources on it, which I'm really happy about. Because for a bit of time, there was like almost not necessarily becoming world computer, but more like a Western world computer. Like there was like this period that was kind of not necessarily people talked about. So yeah, I can't really say. I wanted the Lightning Network to work. It doesn't work as much as good. I've heard like a lot of things about like Cashew, that is like new protocols using Bitcoin that does like offline transactions, which that's something I'm looking into, and I'm really excited to see how that would work. Because that's a word that I want to see as like you can use crypto, but as an offline word, and that's almost like the next level that we can get to. None of them still do it yet, but I feel like where Bitcoin might be easier to do. We'll see. Like if anyone in the chat or anyone know about projects that are working on this or no, please reach out. I want to know more.
Anybody else? I appreciate that, Cheyenne. Anyone else want to answer the overarching question?
I guess I would love to see privacy focused more on both, but it's a difficult push.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good
yeah.
point.
I think Bitcoin needs more giant files stored to its network. I think that's going to be the key to its success. And there's no one on the internet who can convince me otherwise. It's the biggest file possible.
Metaverse on Bitcoin.
Okay. Well, did anyone else want to jump in before we close? I didn't want to cut anyone off, Justin.
Yeah, Ken, I think like going back to your point about how you felt like Ethereum doesn't have necessarily the unity behind it the way Bitcoin does. I think one of the things that we can look at is also kind of their approach to like upgrades, right? For Bitcoin, upgrades are almost always soft forks, right? It's a tightening of the rules. They're very rarely hard fork upgrades that, everyone must upgrade, otherwise the network splits. It's almost always a tightening of the rules. There's backward compatibility, so to speak. But it also means that there aren't as many upgrades. Normally with a Bitcoin upgrade, there's like one big upgrade that brings a huge feature and a few small peripheral ones per upgrade. Whereas with Ethereum, you have sometimes multiple upgrades a year, and each upgrade has like tons of breaking changes. You have Fusaka, for example, that had like, something like 15 different EIPs that were included. So I think that the approach to upgrades are very different, but that also means that the community's approach is also different because the Bitcoin community has less changes. They can be more unified around what their raison d'etre is, what the purpose of Bitcoin is. But because Ethereum is so programmable, it's such a broad church, you've really got so many different like groups of people to look after. You have to look after the account abstraction people, the NFT people, the real world assets on chain people, and I think that also means that it's very hard to have unity. I think the last time there was real unity was like the merge, right? Because clearly we all needed the merge. There was a lot of unity around like, increasing the balances of stakers. So I think that there are a few changes that are clearly needed that everyone unites behind. But because it's such a broad church, it's also very difficult to say that this upgrade is more important than everything else, especially when it's Ethereum has gradually gotten so complex that it's very hard to say that there's a particular EIP that benefits everyone. And that makes it harder for the whole entire community to unite around a particular, a flag or anything like that.
Well said.
Mm-hmm. Josh, were you going to say something?
Guess that's just the nature of creating something focused on general purpose, right? Like it just has a general purpose, but someone has to care for it.
Yeah. Well, we're over time, so I think we should say goodbye for this live stream. But I think kind of to sum up what we've talked about, if you're watching this, whether or not you look at Bitcoin and Ethereum as rivals, or if you think that they complement each other, regardless of your belief, we hope that you've learned something. Hopefully you see value in both, but really just like understanding the why behind these and the technology, I think is super important for individuals to just, use and understand the tech, but also in order for us to keep driving innovation in crypto and Web3, we need to understand what the core principles are and how they play out in each of the technologies and in the space in general. So I found this conversation really interesting, and I hope those who are with us today also found it interesting, useful, educational, and we will have another live stream coming up. We'll let you guys know on socials about it. And anyone have any closing remarks? Aside from we could talk about this for like another 3 hours, probably. Okay. Thank you guys so much for joining today. Really, really appreciate your time. And I'm excited that this was our first live stream with Kent as our new CEP committee chair. So Cheyenne, thank you for your service. I don't know, but we really do appreciate everything you've done for C4 over the years and that you're staying on the committee. And Kent, we are excited that you are now in this new position, and we appreciate you guys. So thank you so much, and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
All right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye.
Right.